primarily what I'm going to talk about today is I do a lot of work in areas of security, and it goes all over the place. And how I landed there is just doing. I started, I think my very first computer was 1982. It was a Timex Sinclair, which was quickly followed by something called a VIC-20 from Commodore, and on to Apple way back in 1982. And so the issue is through high school, there was never any doubt I was going to go to some kind of college, university, but what was I going to study to make money? And I always had a knack for computers. I was always the people, as most of us are, who the family calls when there's ever a computer problem. I have a way with them, and so I've leveraged that throughout my career, not as a career itself, but as an overlay to everything I do. So, for example, when I say physical security provider, what I do there is I take, and throughout the years, I've gotten to know many ex-military people. And in Los Angeles in particular, there are a lot of individuals who need safe transport. And so I own a business where I arrange basically, transport to and from airports with personal security. I even do club security as far as the door services and things like that, almost like a substitute teacher. So over the past 10 years, I've developed a network. And when people need extra security, they call me. And we try to pretty much stay away from the bad things, right? Where you have to carry weapons or anything that just brings trouble. But you need to keep people safe. So that's the area that I work in, physical security. I talked a little bit where my government contractor works, and litigation support. As we go through this, I can't stress enough, it's probably the more lucrative side now that I have so much experience. As I act as a consultant, or sometimes they're called expert witnesses in court cases. So as I've offered, our evidence, what becomes evidence in legal work, to lawyers, attorneys, who try to go get a conviction, is sometimes the court or the opposite side wants you to come in and say, how'd you do that? Questioning your work, etc. But that's an area, like I said, as an overlay, in doing just simple cybersecurity. As an IT person, you're setting up firewalls and whatnot, but if something goes wrong or goes right, there's an entire expertise on the law side. I always call it the areas of chaos. I was looking for a word. I called areas of interest, right? And I said physical, offensive. Now, offensive is basically a hacker, right? And nowadays we don't like to be called that, but those are the people that go out and break things, whether it's for, fun and profit, or it's something where you work on bounty programs, for example. Whether it be mobile, hardware, standard software apps, virtual, in the cloud. This is the offensive areas of security are where you attack. Defense is exactly the opposite. You're the person responsible for defending those people attacking you. Those are generally hardware and software applications that either track, trace, watch for issues coming in, as simple as a firewall, or even something like an intrusion detection system, an IDS, whether it's working or not. I swear in the past 3 years, there's almost nothing that hasn't been broken that was safe. I mean, we look at our simple Wi-Fi security and the things that have had to happen to make them secure. So the defense side is probably, it's a very difficult area because you're constantly looking for ways to fight. and you're only one step behind the people hacking. And so when you can't mitigate, you have to trace. And so a lot at this point of cybersecurity in the real world, a lot of it is you got to cover the bases to protect yourself, but then how fast you can respond if there's a breakdown. And that's that. How fast can you detect and stop and mitigate and trace is where the areas of defensive security works. Then it finally comes to where area that I work in, that's forensics. So after, for example, when Target got a lot of ATM cards stolen, at the time I was asked to take a look at the hardware that was the card readers themselves. Like, how could they be broken? Where did they break in and what did they steal? And how I work that business is with the amount of expertise I have and the people I know is basically I leverage third parties to create a company. Much like you come to this event, and again, your network is your net worth. And I have a group of up to, I'd say, probably 350 individuals that have expertise in various things. And I work with them to come up with how we could break a product, how it could have been broken, where are the weaknesses, right down to doing personal interviews with the IT staff. And I'll get into that area later. It's like, it's one of those things that is so true that you see in movies is that hackers like to talk about what they've done, and your biggest threat is your user base. Most of the hacks come from the inside, in other words. So, in talking to younger people that are headed to higher schools of learning, coming out of high school, I always get the thing is, what's the best certification? What degree should I get my study and things like that. So probably the biggest investment is, so I can probably just say this, is that I graduated from UCI in 1991. I graduated with a degree in physics, or physical sciences, as they would call it. And I have a minor in mathematics. And overall, I can honestly say that probably for the past 25 years, I don't use anything specific to my course, my degree. But what it did bring me is the ability to analyze, the way my mind thinks, the way I break down problems, to believe that there's always an answer somewhere in the ether, you just haven't found it yet. That's how physicists work, right? They're working on foundational mechanics, but in the real world, it has allowed me to advance more than my peers. My first few jobs actually out of UCI, the first one was on the weekends, we worked on refurbishing hard drives. And we would literally, military ship would dock in Long Beach. We'd run onto that ship, replace hard drives. And these hard drives, because at the time in the mid 90s, were literally the size of file cabinets. So you literally have tractors and forklifts to bring them on and off ships. So again, figuring out what's wrong quickly under pressure, fixing things like that all came from my degree in physics. I couldn't have done this job without that. So areas of study. My area of study is, what I would recommend to people is study something that you're interested in, because it is something that you'll do you'll use as a base all your life, but you may not do it for very long. I ended up being in consumer electronics as a physicist. I started in tech support and moved on from there, and now I'm C-level at the company. And I have many businesses on the side that I apply security stuff to as an overlay. So as I said, is that I do transport for talent from airports. I do forensics, computer forensics. I have had jobs recently, last 2 years, pulling cable, doing infrastructures. I used to do a lot of training, both business rules all the way to actually how you set up a network. But the one thing that's clear in anything that you decide to do, understand that you'll never stop learning. I'm in my mid-50s, and I probably at this point have dozens and dozens of certificates. Everything from injury corrections, injury prevention and correction specialist, all the way down to my CISSP, for example, for security. The thing is that when you work cybersecurity, it's not about your traditional certs. That might be the checkbox to get you the job, but it probably won't help you. Your experiences, your experimentation, and just simply working and attending these kind of events constantly will help you the most. I would say probably 50% of my free time is doing educational stuff. And it's not like book opening stuff. I'm like, I'll see an interesting blog post of a person that, hey, I got, this VR setup working in the cloud. I'm like, I got to try that. I got to know how they did it. And so that's how it actually works in my world, is that it's just constantly learning the new tools. You're only good as your last hack. So tell you a little bit more, things that I've learned that might help you think as you go through any kind of form of IT design, electrical engineering, chemical, mechanical engineering, anything that you're interested in. Most of these things apply. Okay, I just applied them to cybersecurity, and it's quite funky. There's a classic quote that if you want peace, prepare for war, and that truly is on any kind of application career. In other words, hands-on. When you're doing any kind of design, whether it's just web work, whether you're a social influencer, whether you're a person like me that's cybersecurity, is that you're constantly working. And you're only as good as your last hack, because I can probably guarantee you, anybody that's looking at this video, you have skills that I don't, and vice versa. Again, you're constantly moving, constantly learning, and for cybersecurity, it's one of these things where you just got to get in and do. There are certifications out there, but nothing actually works better than actually attempting to do what you need to do. And that'll actually probably guide a lot of where you want to make your career at once you're out of college, where you want to go. And I have some, if I would correct some things with my own, I would have taken, and I'll tell you what those things would be. But again, prepare for war. In other words, your experience as much as you can, and that will actually make you have a good career if this is an area that you want to work in, and probably applies to almost any career. Specifically to my area, so as IT and security, things to think about. If you're, probably many of you today, I think at this event, you guys are building applications and sites and things to benefit people. If you want to work behind the scenes and how these operate and how to protect them and protect yourself and the liabilities that come along with having an e-commerce site and somebody breaks in and takes all your credit card information and things of that nature, is that in the last couple of years, it is a big deal, and that is this concept of Devops. Devops is kind of a new role, if you will. They are the IT guy between the development side and the network side. And it's a very wide area, but they are very, very much the guidance of a safe system, or that's where IT today shifts where things need to be protected. It's because today many businesses don't have servers on site. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Some of my recommendations is that use virtualization. So in other words, if you haven't taken and set up a virtual PC, in other words, a PC on the internet with AWS or Azure, you should. From where I'm at today, I use just a simple MacBook Pro, but within 5 minutes, I can attach to one of the biggest computers in the world that processes more information than I could even imagine virtually. On AWS and Azure, you can set up Windows PCs. So I use a MacBook Pro, but I have every operating system available to me in about 30 seconds because I can just flip over to a virtual machine that would be Linux or Windows, and I can test within those environments. The next thing is where virtualization is going, and that's this concept of containerization. So virtualization is a higher level function of simulating a device. Virtualization would basically take, for example, if you want to virtualize a router that you're having an issue with, or you know that a router has been broken by a hacker, you can take and set that up completely with CPU, memory, storage, everything virtually, and simulate that product complete. Containerization is a little bit more granular. It is a virtualization, just end of subject. It's just how it does it. Containerization basically is less heavy. So it doesn't, if I do a virtualization of a router, I have to set up a complete virtualized router, a complete virtualized Windows server, a complete virtualization of an iPhone. Containerization would allow me to take an operating system, let's say Linux, and take components of that operating system and run, for example, some of you will probably know what DNS is, the domain name system, the thing that converts IP addresses to names like Amazon.com. A container could be just on a Linux server and only do DNS. That's all it does. Completely separate little server on same system. And that system probably has more time to do other things. For example, you could set up a container for email, a container for translation, a container for your website. And all of a sudden on this one server, rather than having 4 virtual servers, I now have 4 containers. And it's highly efficient to do this. The reason why containerization has become so popular is because with a virtualized PC, it acts like a virtual PC. I have to go to the virtualization software that makes that device. I have to start it up. I have to reboot it. It acts like the real big machine. Containerization, I can take and have one system running all these different applications in separate little, what they call containers, and I can start them in milliseconds. Why that's a big deal is that when you're dealing with virtual machines, container machines that are on Amazon Web Services or Azure, or you name, there's many more, Vultr, DigitalOcean, is that I can have a bunch of PCs and the containers can be started for a web server almost instantly. I can have a web server start up in like 2 or 3 milliseconds on the cloud. So that means the day after Christmas, when I have a huge surge for people to get firmware updates and get information and download stuff from my support, I can instantly, as traffic comes up, I can take and create more web servers to serve it almost instantly. So it used to be I would have to start more virtual machines. Now I'm just actually breaking down to a further component of the application. I can just start more web servers. And this is how an Instagram can take and ingress or take in so many pictures per second. It's ridiculous. It's hundreds of thousands to millions a second, and serve them up into an app. It's because they're able to dynamically scale through containerization. The person that takes and does all that orchestration is DevOps. So again, think about DevOps in IT. Think about virtualization. Know that it really is containerization is where people are working today. I would say right now, if you're going to work in the IT space, you would be behind if you don't know AWS or Azure. Coming to these conferences, I think your peers would say the same thing. You'd be behind if you don't know Docker. Docker is a containerization system. Docker probably doesn't have that long to live. Something is going to replace it, but it is a containerization rather than using a virtualization, something like VMS, or there's dozens out there that do virtualization. Containerization is Docker most popular. The next is that you should get on there. It's a way to, as you program, as you move along in versions and make changes, it's a version control system. So it allows you to take and you open up a code, you fix something, you re-get it, and then that you realize you made a mistake, you can reverse it. It's almost like having a trash can when you're programming. I highly recommend it. Now, Git is way more than this. Git is involved with those DevOps chains, is that as your developers create stuff, you're on the other side, is that you have to tell servers, go get that version or go get that application. This is how for example, a Facebook or Twitter works, is that they have an army of developers worldwide that they push all their changes in maybe only one small feature to a common Git that goes out to a test server base, and it's tested, and then with a simple signal, it's slowly uploaded to the real servers in a managed way. So systems don't go down much. Besides Facebook and all that's related recently. The last thing, if you're going to specifically work in cybersecurity, you should be downloading Kali Linux for your operating system. They're virtualized for Windows and Mac. Kali Linux is a Linux that basically has all the base tools you'll need. As I said, when you're doing cybersecurity, it's about the tools that you know. It's the tool sets. When somebody calls me and say, I have a breach, I don't know what that means, right? I have to go there, interview some people, or do like this virtually, and then I need access. Like, what logs do you have? What logs do you keep? How do you keep them? I took a look at that. If it was something where they got in from the outside, I have to take and check all the inbound, the ingress to that network. You have to go check all the firmwares. Kali Linux has hundreds of tools built into it to help you do this. Everything from tools to exploit web applications, mobile applications, right down to simulators, literally, that you can download Linksys's latest firmware, put it in a simulator, and be able to throw hacks at it to see what goes wrong. So Kali Linux is an invaluable tool set. I use it every moment that I open and I'm working on network security, or I'm trying to hack or figure out what hackers did. So invaluable. Finally, the concept of some timescale databases. This is a This is an oftenly, I should say, often missed subject, unless you're working in DevOps today. Timescale databases are databases, could be SQL, it could be any kind of form of databases, that are specifically meant to take in, hold, and analyze data that's on time. Where do you find that? Logs. So in general, today, if you were to set up servers in the cloud or applications in the cloud, et cetera, you're constantly feeding information into timescale databases. Now, we all heard the news, we've watched Netflix documentaries, et cetera. These timescale databases are what, for example, the Facebook app is reporting all this data back from itself to a timescale database. And then there's applications on the other side that are coming in there looking for patterns using machine language, or in some case, if they're machine language models that they appear to work, it'll turn into some kind of AI decision network. And so timescale databases are not normal SQL databases. These are things that, every entry that comes in has a date and time stamp. Those are logs. And by combining various servers, you can begin to see a story. And Kali Linux has tools to deal with it. And the more you learn about how those timescale databases will be your advantage in doing any kind of forensic work. For example, I did with the recent riots last year in May and June, unfortunately, here in the States. I was doing a lot of work of timing up public camera video to cell phone tracking video. So when people did some things that were illegal in that local environment and whatnot, you could zero in to a specific cell phone. A cell phone on a daily basis puts out up to a terabyte of information. So you go over 7 days with 1,000 cell phones, you can imagine the size of those logs. This is where those tools of having a virtual system, I could not crank that on my laptop. Not even to try to fold that in with video, you need much larger systems. That's why virtualized systems, container systems that I can connect to that can scale those kind of operations are invaluable. So I do a lot of work on that on the location data of cell phones and timing it to events that also have tracking. So last part is more in general to everyone that's attended the conference that I think would take and help you as you go through your careers, things to consider. First one, get a law degree. And the reason why I'm not saying go become a lawyer. No, it's like I deal with them every day. It takes a certain kind of personality. God bless you if you've picked that career. What I'm saying is a lot of people, when they get to the end of the 4 or 5 years of their university and they have a degree in horticulture, that's great. It's what their passion is in, right? Now, what I've learned from being a physicist and being out in the real world, if I would have a law degree, and what I mean is, I'm not saying I want to be an attorney at all, but if I had at least completed a BA, a 2-year degree in law, when I sit in a room and I have to defend anything that I do in cybersecurity, right? Like, how'd you do this? Why'd you do this? And they use all these terms because cybersecurity is a liability for everyone, right? It's like, again, when somebody gets breached, you're dealing with personal information. That's a very sensitive topic to any government, local, state, federal. And a law degree allows you to, one, look at contracts effectively, look at liability. How does insurance function in that environment? How do you establish, what's criminal and what's civil? Knowing those things, regardless of whether you are a accountant all the way out to the janitor, having a concept of of law would help you so much. I didn't pursue it, but I've been exposed now for 10 years. I've been a chief witness in a case with the Federal Trade Commission on a case that took 6 years and had a successful outcome. And boy, I wish I would. One is I never want to be an attorney because I've dealt with it, but it would sure be nice to know when they say the terms that they did, I know what they mean. It's an advantage. You learn strategy. You learn contractual obligations. You look at different, when you're out there in business, you'll begin to think about what are my positives and what are my liabilities. And really, when you're dealing with cybersecurity, when you're offensive security, offensive security, you're a hacker. You make most of your money from bounty programs because there's a lot of companies out there, and there's sites that, it's like if you make a valid documented breach of some system, they'll pay you money. And I know hundreds of people that make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. It's their career. They work from, who knows, Costa Rica doing this. The problem with this is that if you look at terms of agreements of websites and hardware manufacturers and things like that, those companies are getting very savvy. And in my area of expertise with consumer electronics, if you're an offensive hacker and you legitimate, meaning well, go to a company and they said, we told you that's illegal. We said in our user terms that if you hack our stuff, we will sue you. We'll take you up on criminal charges. It's a very, very weird part of the law right now, where a lot of hackers who mean well, sometimes they're called white hackers, right? They're trying to bring up hacks to companies saying, you got to fix this, otherwise bad things will happen from black hackers. Is you have to watch yourself that companies are willing to work with you and they won't send you a legal document that makes you go to court saying, why the heck you do that? It's because they don't know whether you're black or white and you mean well. They don't know whether you just did this one hack and are holding one in the back pocket to get more money as hostage. They don't know any of that. So it's a real tricky space right now. Very few countries in the world have laws to protect hackers today. So know what you're getting into your liabilities when you're doing some of this stuff, because it could easily be misrepresented. The next thing is that, always bugs my bosses, but, unfortunately, when you're hacking, I work in a defensive situation. I work forensics, is that my busiest times are Saturday nights and Christmas Eve. It is every year for the past 15 years. I get all my calls saying, somebody broke in, my network went down. It looks like, 4 a.m. on Christmas Eve. Sure enough, because people aren't around monitoring those systems. It's the easiest time for hackers to get in. So when you work in this area, understand that you're working against the normal flow of business. Most of your research, your investigations, et cetera, are outside the normal working hours. And that can be frustrating. It can be a toll on your personal life. So work-life balance is very important. If you're putting in those opposite hours, make sure you're taking for your own health the regular times for yourself. Otherwise, sometimes all this stuff becomes too much, and then you leave the career and you do something else and you might not be as happy. The next thing is, and it's just absolutely crazy, is that businesses need you. They don't want you. Understand that anything you do costs them money. It will cost them time and performance. You're there to protect them, right? For example, you put in a firewall, all of a sudden your firewall, because it's doing all the analysis, is taking 50% of your bandwidth, and they'll go, I'm paying for a 10 megabit link, but I'm only getting a 1 megabit because your firewall is slowing everything down. That's a very simple story, but it's true. The other thing is I have more than a dozen jobs that I've done on my personal businesses where I've been fired because they believed that I was the culprit. So, when you're called into, hey, look at my network, see where the weaknesses are. And as you go through the interviewing with IT staff, you get into a political issue, and then you become the one that's doing the problem. So again, understand on this side of the business, it really is about every log that you track, being transparent about everything you do. Understand that cybersecurity really, some of the data, even though it says black and white, what doesn't really tell you the truth. So when you're out there, there is a lot of politics involved. Because again, a lot of CEOs don't want to hear, yes, it was a breach, because then they have liability that could kill their business. And you're the person that has to deliver that information. So understand your role. And how you get out of that is document, right? This is not your problem as a cybersecurity. You just say, look, here's the proof. You decide. That's the best case scenario. So they're understanding managing your liabilities. This is why today, honestly, I work in forensics. I work after. So in other words, they call me to figure out how they did it. There's so much less liabilities in doing that because they know that they've been breached. Now we got to figure out how they did it. They're not coming to me and say, how can I prevent that? That's not my problem. I can this is how they broke in. Now call somebody, say that can fix how they broke in. So that's why I go to the end of the chain. I go forensics, because for me, it's least amount of liability. As a third-party security person, I also take, I should say, a third-party security business. Because of these liabilities in hacking, and it's, for example, I come in and I've discovered this is how they did it. I can never be 100% sure that's how they did it, right? You're only good as your last hack. You're one step behind every hacker till the next time Microsoft takes and releases an update and they mess it up. Is that you're only good as what you documented, right? Because you turn in a report saying this is how they get in, and they're focused on that. Meanwhile, they get broken into again, which has happened to me. Realizing what you just gave as proof is not the right proof. So working in forensics and working with the government, I'm protected because I work for government contracts. The government takes that liability. When I turn in my report, that's just evidence. It can be argued yes, no, or maybe so. So that's why I preferred and built myself into the last part of the chain, because least liability. And I work for the government because it's the least amount of protection. It's the most amount of protection I get. My employer takes all the brunt of that action. People won't personally sue me if something else happens. Protection. Doing the job. Again, this is probably in any case, you have to suspect everything. Inside, outside, the people involved, the IT staff, even they have a CISO, for example, you have to suspect everything until you yourself have discovered the evidence. The next thing is, unfortunately, this is an area, much like being an attorney, where you need to decide what you want to do with your personal convictions. For example, if you're called into by a country that has questionable values, if you don't want to be involved with that work, don't do it. I'm not saying give up your personal convictions. You should not. You're allowed to change your mind and your opinions throughout your life, regardless of what social media says, right? You're not, don't get tied to your convictions, hold your convictions. So if it's a job that you don't feel that they're doing the right thing, get out, right? That's all on you. Move on, do something else. finally, something that I learned very early on, and most people don't understand truly, is that doing the right thing is that most often when you have to ask yourself that question, what's the right thing? That's going to be painful, because doing the right thing usually isn't in your advantage. But that's why I stay at a company for 30 years, is because they believe what I do and they trust me. Right or wrong decisions, they know the information that I give them, and I support them. They know that it's the truth that we know today. So again, whatever you decide to do, when you ask yourself, do the right thing, sometimes it could have some severe penalties, but you will come out much better in the future. So last slide, appreciate all your time, is that my personal thoughts, if, for example, if I think I don't have a lot of regrets. I don't have any regrets. To be honest with you, I've had a very lucky life. But if I would change things, or as I look out to things that I'd like to change, one, I would probably, rather than work in the consumer electronics business, I would have probably worked in some kind of financial related business, something to do with money. Go work for a casino in cybersecurity, go work for a bank, investment houses, go get part-time jobs as day traders, things of that nature. Because just like having a law degree, understanding money, profit, margin, front-end margin, back-end margin, true-up margin, all these funky things will get your career farther ahead, and what your goals need to be to where you want to be in life, if you're doing some kind of business related to money. That's just something to think about. Next, as I keep on saying throughout my whole discussion, is your network is your net worth. Frequently, as cybersecurity experts, is that we spend endless hours alone in a room in front of the screens. But coming to these conferences, you should make it a requirement. Knowing and using everybody you meet, from your professors to your teachers to your friends. If you join fraternal organizations, businesses, everything through your life will be threaded to how the people you know, the people you surround yourself with, has a direct relation to your success. In other words, it's really hard in a short lifetime to do it on your own. I mean, even people like Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, they never did it alone. They found people in areas that they were weak in, and those other peoples were strong, and together they made things like Tesla, PayPal, Facebook, Twitter, Craigslist, Netflix. All those people there never did it alone. There's always a money guy, there's always a law guy, there's always, in some cases, they're your college friends. They're people that you meet at these kind of conferences. Again, your network is your net worth. Lastly, and this has to do with me looking back on some of the, I work in a very youthful career, right? The fact that I'm in my mid 50s working in cybersecurity, not really as a manager, I'm actually doing the work, is absolutely crazy. Because I have, like, some people out here that I'm talking to have way more skills than I do. They know about tools or built tools that are greater than I'll ever use. And the thing is, with cybersecurity, is what I warn people the most is that cybersecurity is a threat no matter what you do. From what we've seen from power grids, shutting down of gasoline fuel pipelines, infiltrations of our government computers, cancel culture, all that kind of stuff is related to anxiety with many people. It affects their work performance. It affects how they are as a person. But understand, the faster you can react right now in this moment is what changes things. Worrying about the past, worrying what your future is going to be, has very little to. It can influence. It can't change things. What you do at this moment is what matters. Some people put it in endless books called The Power of Now, or whatever the case may be. But understand, when you act right now. And the faster you can, the better off you'll be. That's why you research. That's why you get as many experience. That's why you reach out to your network and leverage them as much as possible. It's about how fast you can react right now will have a lot to do with your success and your speed above your peers. And regardless of what you will do in life. So with that end, that's the end of my soapbox. I don't know if there's any questions out there. I left my email on the front of here, and I'm sure the organizers of the conference, I have a website at www.imatwill.com, and you're always welcome there. I can be a part of your network. I don't know how much I can help you, but I'm always willing to help if you ask questions. And with that, I'll open if there's any. If not, we're almost at the top of the hour. I think that's it for me. Is anything else?
If no one else has a question, I have a little question, but if you were in physics, how would you get a job in tech? Because I've heard all sorts of stories like of people not doing jobs related to their what they studied in college.
Yeah.
But I feel like in comparison, if you're trying to get a job and you're competing with a guy who has a computer science degree, they'd be like, I think, well, I don't know at this point because I'm just a wee little high schooler, but what's the strat?
Yeah, understood. So, if I rewind to the moment I graduated at UCI, and it's probably the last couple of years you're there. You're like you're sitting there and like, I'm doing okay, but what can a physicist do? That was the real thing. Well, the number one thing is that when you go to an advanced degree program, a lot of the advanced degrees, to be successful, you have to remain in education. So for a physicist, you go on to be a professor. And the jobs that actually use those physics degrees are usually research companies that are related to universities. And so in the end, when I'm sitting there coming out of UCI, what am I going to do? Is that I looked at how I made money to pay for my school, and that was helping people with computers. So after going out in the initial 6 months of looking and interviewing, I think I interviewed 47 different interviews, from oil companies to chemical companies, doing all sorts of crazy things, and realizing that if I'm going to be successful, I'm going to have to go get a doctorate. And not wanting to go into school, not wanting to pay off some of the student loans I had, I'm like, okay, I'll go into computers, and that led me down this path. So it was one of those things like, I need money. And how do you get a job at something that you don't know? You go into the support side of organizations. So what I did is I just became part of tech support. I worked at 3 or 4, like I said, first job out of college, I ran on and off naval vessels, pushing big carts of hard drives. And then that just growed. I had my work ethic. I learned more, and just grew from there. And I eventually joined this consumer electronics company. So for me, being in a application area, an engineer, a software engineer, et cetera, where I didn't have exactly like an IS degree, I decided to go into support organizations to learn more, because whatever I learned in tech support, I could go elsewhere, right? I can go to the next IT who could using just continue to build. Because as a physicist, I'm not going to make a whole lot of money unless I go back to the advanced degree. Now, how you compete at the job level. So one is most likely you're not going to get the interview if you don't have the checkbox, right? So if it's a DevOps job, some kind of development job, if you don't have an IS degree, you probably won't even get a call back. That's a part of it. That's why your network is your net worth. Every job that I have gotten, no matter how much I've applied, all the good jobs that I've gotten have been from recommendations, from professors, from peers, to people working in the organizations I want to work for. It's always people on the inside the know that have the track. So the answer is how you compete is based on what you did in your past and who you know. That's just a reality of the situation. The only people that get direct interviews is if you can check all the boxes. I have an ICS degree. I have 3 years of experience. I'm willing to work for $5 an hour, whatever the job description is on Indeed or LinkedIn. You'll make your biggest advances based on who you know. And in many cases, it's your fraternal brothers from college. It could be somebody you meet at a party or part of a club that, hey, I'm working here, I need extra help. They know you're trustworthy because they worked with you in other areas. You did activities like this event. They know that you're good and in this area, they can trust you, they hire you. So the answer is that if you can't check the boxes, it is about who you know.
Thank you very much.
If anybody wants to, again, ask me questions, they're welcome to contact me by email. I'm working constantly. I work most of my personal businesses off hours, research and developing. The areas that I'm working on right now are, believe it or not, I'm doing research with VR security, which nobody is really dealing with, and it's a problem. The second thing is that I'm building many tools for day traders. I'm not a gambling kind of person. I don't day trade. I have my 401k. But I build tools to help them do their own gambling. That's not security work at all, but it is related. Working with algorithms, timing, timescale databases, things of that nature. So it doesn't just apply to security. As you gain your skills, you'll scratch your head and go, maybe it's time to build that Bitcoin mining rig. Because I've done that too. Yeah, so, but again, I appreciate the time. Is there any other questions for today? All right. Thank you very much, Brennan, for the invite.
And thank you very much for speaking at our event. I really appreciate it.
All good. And if you have another one, I'd be happy to. Again, anybody can reach out to me anytime. Take care and have a good day.
Thank you.